Okay, let's talk about scrap busting projects. So welcome, we are entering silly season at the moment. We've just had Halloween. This weekend in the UK is Bonfire Night, Ferrets Night, Guy Fawkes Night, whatever you want to call it. We're also in the middle of the run up to Diwali. In the States you've got Thanksgiving coming up, and then of course we've got the December bonanza of gift giving. Now, if you make anything, either for yourself or for other people, you're going to end up with lots of scraps and leftovers and bits and pieces throughout the course of the year. So let's have a little think about how we can use some of those scraps, some of those leftovers, to make other projects as gifts for other people or for ourselves. You're allowed to give things to yourself, that's not a problem. So let's start with sewing ideas, and then we'll move on to knitting and crochet. And these are all relatively quick and easy projects to make, and I'll give you examples up on the screen for you to see what I'm talking about as we go. Let's dive into the sewing. Now, I did make a few notes on my trusty iPad, so if I do look away, that's what I'm checking, just to make sure I cover all of the ideas that I had whilst I'm talking to you. So sewing projects, using scraps, using leftovers, these are going to be relatively quick makes compared to your garments and your big massive quilts and that kind of thing. So let's think first of all, what could we do that we can probably work out without any tutorials, without any patterns? Well, gift bags, pouches, that kind of thing. Project bags, if you can draw a square or a rectangle, you can make yourself a pattern for a bag or a pouch. If you know how to put a zip in, you could do a zip one that could be used for makeup, for pencil cases, for notions pouches, or if you like zipped up project bags. So yeah, there's loads of things that you can actually do with simple shapes. And seam them up, you can patchwork things together to create your fabric, you can line them if you want, which is just another excuse for using up another bit of leftover fabric, quite frankly. So yeah, there's loads of ways you can do that, and I will be peppering around just some images of the sorts of things I'm talking about, just so that you can visualize it. There are places where you can go on the internet to learn how to make these sorts of bags. You can Google them, you can look on YouTube, they're all over the place. But if you've got a little bit of sewing experience behind you, or you've done nets in school in maths, you can pretty much work this out yourself, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Moving on to the next idea that I had. Again, this is something that you could probably work out how to do without any tutorials, but there are places on Google and on YouTube that will show you how to do it. And that's hair scrunchies. If you're not familiar with hair scrunchies, they're these things. They're the fabric hairbands that you put in. So it's elastic covered in an excess, roughly, wonderfulness of fabric. There are some that have like little bow tails on them. So you can do all sorts of different hair ties in the same sort of manner, using up little bits of fabric. So if you don't have huge amounts of fabric left over from things, that might be the way to go for you. Now, the third category of sewing project that I've got for you, and my last sewing idea that I had, and there are more, I'm sure you will think of more, but this is just an example, is the Smocked Bauble. Part of the reason that this has come to mind is I get a newsletter from Pink Hollybush, who does smocking videos on YouTube, and she also runs Smocked Bauble courses, apparently each year. I've only recently signed up to her. This year she's doing a Christmas tree shaped one. In the past she's done round ball shaped ones, but I'm sure somebody who's a bit more experienced with smocking than I am could probably work out how to do them. I don't know whether she can't be putting them over a bauble, because the Christmas tree one, baubles are round. So it must be sort of holding its own shape somehow. So that's definitely something to look into. It wouldn't take a huge amount of fabric, but you would want probably a longer scrap in order to gather it down to get the shape that you're looking for. But that could be quite a nice sort of carving out a bit of time in the build up to the big events, doing a little bit each day, because the gathering stitch is going to take you some time unless you've got a pleater. So doing a little bit each day, you can maybe do a little set of a few baubles, you maybe add to them each year. Might be a nice little tradition to start, and it uses up some of your scraps at the same time. So win-win. So thinking now more about the yarny crafts, so your knitting, your crochet, that kind of thing. Now, I love a good scrap project. Obviously you've got your big scrap blankets that go on for decades because you're just doing a little bit at a time. So we're not going to think too much about those. But the first one that I am going to suggest is something a bit more practical. Blankets are nice and practical, they're also very pretty, but this is a very specifically practical project. Bowl cozies. Yes, you could do these as a sewing project actually as well. I have crocheted a bowl cozy before. I need to do a pair for it. There's 2 of us living here. And they're essentially bowl-shaped bits of fabric, whether you've knitted them, crocheted them, sewn them, whatever, that go around the outside of your bowl. So when you've got a hot soup or a stew, you're not burning your hands. You probably don't want to be using acrylic for this. You want something that's going to hold up to the heat, that's not going to melt in heat, much as if you're doing like a pot holder or something. You'd want something that's going to be able to withstand that heat. They're super practical this time of year as well. You're going to be eating more soups and stews if you're anything like me. So they're nice and handy for the days where you're not eating at a table, or the days when you're just carrying a bowl through from the kitchen to the table. They're a nice project. They use a reasonable amount of yarn, but not a horrific amount. And you could do them in like scrappy stripes and work through all sorts of things as you're going up the bowl. There are patterns available for them, but with a bit of knowledge of crochet in particular, you'd be able to essentially have the bowl that you want it to fit and sort of sculpt the crochet around it to make the shape that you're looking for. Using the same process, you could also make baskets and bowls for storing things out of knitting or crochet. Crochet is probably going to hold up a little bit better than knitting. And again, that is a project that you could work a similar version with sewing. So you can use up all your scraps of all varieties with bowls and baskets. The next scrappy leftover type project for knitting and crochet that I've thought of is a headband. I've knit a headband before. It's a nice cabled headband from a pattern on Ravelry. But again, this is something you could work out yourself. You could do it in scrappy stripes, changing the colours whenever you feel like it. You could put whatever stitch pattern in you like. If you're making it for yourself, you're just measuring it against your head. Making it for somebody else, then you might need to do a sneaky bit of measuring to sort of work out how long you need to make it. If you make it by casting on or chaining sort of the narrow way, the bit that's going to go that way round, then you just need to knit it to the length or crochet it to the length that you want and graft the two together, seam the two together. Or you could take a hat pattern and just essentially work the brim stitch count to the depth that you want the headband to be. So that would be nice and simple, be relatively quick to knit or to crochet. Crochet should be super speedy actually for that one. And yeah, you can use whatever yarn you've got on hand to make that up. So you could coordinate it with shawls and cowls and jumpers that you've already made. Use the leftovers from those projects to make an accessory to go with it. The same is true for actually all of my wearable ideas here. You can make them match what you've already made by using the leftovers. The third one is hats. If you've made a few hats, you'll already know what sort of stitch count you need for the people that you normally knit hats for. And once you've knit a few hats, you'll know what the decreases or the increases if you're going crown down. Are there any crown down hat patterns out there? I tend to knit mine brim up. But yeah, you'll know the stitch count that you like, you'll know the sort of decreases that you like, and there are obviously oodles of patterns around for hats. Some free, some not free. Pick your poison. So yeah, that'd be a relatively quick knit or a relatively quick crochet because hats are fairly small. And again, you can use whatever you've got on hand. You can mix and match, you can change colours whenever you like. And if you have a leftover half skein of yarn, that might be enough for some people to knit a hat. I need a little bit more than half a skein in fingering weight for me. For things like the Musselburgh hat, I used just over half of each of the skeins. I had enough left to do shorty socks, so not quite half a skein left of each, to give you sort of a sense of how much yarn you would need. Obviously, heavier weight yarn, you're going to need less because, well, the Musselburgh is double layered, being a fingering weight hat. Colourwork hats, you're going to need less in terms of yardage of each colour, so that'll be good for using up scraps. And yeah, you can have a nice little selection of hats to match your outfits, to match your mood. Different one each week. You never know, you might end up with an entire advent set to wear through December. Did anybody else's brain work like mine? The next idea I had, again sticking with the scrappy half skeins, mini skeins, leftovers type idea, scrappy socks, scrappy mittens, colourwork socks, colourwork mittens. All of these things are not going to use an awful lot of each particular yarn. And again, you can make them to coordinate things you've already made, or you can make them to just be their own wonderful mesh up of all the scrappy goodness. So they're going to be good. And again, relatively quick to make. So you can probably carve out little pockets of time throughout silly season to spend to yourself. Give yourself that time to do the crafting. That in itself is a gift. The sticking on the same theme of making things to coordinate with things you've already got, things you can wear that can coordinate. Cowls. They're not as long as a scarf. They're not as complex as the decreases and increases for various different shapes of shawls. You just need to know how many stitches you want to go around your neck, which will depend varying on, well, who you're knitting them for, who you're crocheting them for, and how loose or how tight you want them to be. If you want something fairly snug, I would go with the same stitch count that you use for a hat, or thereabouts. And if you want them looser, you're just going to add more stitches for however much looseness that you want. Knit them as long as you want them to be. You can also knit them by casting on or chaining on the narrow end and knitting a long length like you would for a scarf and tying them together, or grafting them together, seaming them together rather. It's up to you. Again, that's going to be a nice way to coordinate things that you're wearing to keep cozy and warm with the things that you've already made, with the sweatshirts you've already made, if you are a garment knitter or a garment crocheter. And my final selection of ideas for things that you can make with yarn for silly season, for either yourself or for gifting. Decorations, all sorts of decorations. There are colourwork bauble patterns out there. There are garlands of Santa's outfits that on a washing line that you can make. There's mitten garlands, there's stocking garlands. All of that kind of stuff is great for using up smaller amounts of yarn in knitting or crochet to decorate your home, or to gift to somebody who's maybe just set up a new home and is having their first Christmas in their new home. Nice little gift of a Christmas decoration that they can put up each year. It'd be a lovely tradition to have for people. I just spent a little while actually where I used to put Christmas decoration on the presents that I wrapped under the tree so that people could add to the decorations each year. It's nice little touches like that that can work quite well. The other decoration thought that I had in terms of yarny stuff, and I'm hoping that while I'm editing this I can find an image of what I have in my head, because I've not seen it anywhere in terms of being made from home. I've seen like the little felt versions, so needle felted versions of this, and I've seen shop ones where they are felt versions of this. But a pom-pom garland, how great would that be? You can add to it each year, you can make it longer each year. You could crochet a chain between the pom-poms to tie them together. You could knit an I-cord to do the same thing. But yeah, a whole string of pom-poms to decorate your home with. And you know what? They would work all year round for a kid's room or a student room. It'd be great. So yeah, hopefully I'll be able to find an image of what I have in my head for that. Somebody must have done it. I can't be the only person that's ever thought of making a pom-pom garland. I can't be. It's just not possible. It's too simple and too good an idea for it to have come from my brain first. So I will try and find an image of somebody having done that kind of thing. It must be out there somewhere, and I'll put that up on the screen for you. Whilst I'm digging out these patterns and images to put up on the screen, I will put any tutorials and patterns that I find in the description box down below for you, so that if you don't feel confident coming up with the pattern to do it yourself, that you've got a resource there to refer to and to get you started. So thank you for spending time in my company today. I'd love to see you in the next one, which will be next weekend. In the meantime, there is this video here that might be of interest to you whilst you're waiting. But until then, happy crafting and bye-bye for now.